Hello, this is Henry Fogel along with Ralph Creviso, and we're going to talk in this video about the relationship between management and artistic functions, and specifically the management leader, whatever that title might be, executive director, sometimes president, and the artistic director. Not all art forms have that same structure. In symphony orchestras, the norm is for the music director, who would be a conductor, to be equal on the staff structure chart to the executive director, or maybe it's called president, and they both report to the board. There are some exceptions to that where the music director reports to the executive director, but actually it doesn't really work that way anyway, because the executive director doesn't get to hire the music director without a search committee, doesn't get to fire him without board approval. In other organizations, the artistic director may not be a director. It may be a staff member in a theater reporting to the general director of the theater, and the same with opera. But I would say this, and Ralph, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. Whatever the relationship is on paper, the most important thing is that the management always remember the importance of the art and the artists, and therefore make sure that whoever is responsible for that function in the corporation doesn't disappear from important discussions.
I think it might be helpful to clarify a little bit when we talk about this, what roles each individual has. In a corporation, let's take away, we'll talk about performing arts organizations just for a minute. In corporations, you have very hierarchical, as we talked before, top-down structure, where the CEO is the person who has sole responsibility for the entire entity, relationship with the board, how the organization defines its mission, how it defines its product or service, how it produces those products or services. The performing arts organization is different in that the way the organization has to function, on the one hand, day to day, who pays the bills, who processes bills, who processes payroll, who raises money, who sells tickets, who markets the product. That's under administration. The artistic component is handled usually, and this depends on performing arts genre, by an artistic person. Now, in a symphony orchestra, it's a music director. In an opera, the music and the administration is usually combined into a general director. Although an artistic director, and Henry, you may want to comment on this, leads the artistic vision. But in an opera, the functions are more concentrated into one area as opposed to an orchestra. In a theater, that could be very different. In a theater, it depends on the business model of the theater. You could be a presenting organization where all you do is present the productions of others. You could be a producing organization where you actually produce the presentation, hiring the actors, hiring if they're musicians, and putting it on yourself. And the role of the artistic leader will vary by genre. Henry, you want to clarify that a bit?
Well, I would add that in the theater world, many theaters are a mixture of the two types that Ralph talked about. They present some things by outside companies, and they produce their own material. That's particularly true of nonprofit theaters. If in for-profit theaters, which often are just renting and presenting houses, and mostly Broadway type material. But if it's a nonprofit theater, a theater that therefore seeks contributed revenue, it almost always has some things it produces itself. And it may be that under the theater CEO, whatever title that person has, under that theater CEO is a chief program officer that is making decisions in part based on some artistic vision rather than just which do we think will sell the most tickets. And I guess to me, the important thing in the relationship, whatever the structure is that the management always remembers, whoever is the senior manager always remembers that the reason the management exists is for the art to be presented. And therefore, the art and whoever represents the art always has to have a seat at the table when issues of importance are discussed. And one of the important things, and this is true, I think, in all of the forums, is that the artistic director not only has a relationship to the CEO, but to other management senior positions as well, like marketing and fundraising. And certainly the artistic director in orchestra and opera companies are expected to play a role in fundraising. You, Ralph, may want to talk about that role. That's more than just an artistic role, but it is important because it's the artistic director often that the public identifies with.
And I think that's the key. The public, and this is the ticket buying public, are interested in what is being presented, how much does it cost, how is it sold. The behind the scenes of pricing and marketing and developing subscription packages is all in the administration side. But the public is looking at the artistic director as the person they look to in defining the product. So the artistic leader can have a significant influence in defining the organization to the community. Therefore, the artistic leader can be an important element, an important component of not only marketing. He or she has a vision of what the product is and shapes it and is the best advocate for it, but they can also create that value proposition we talked about with the community, where the artistic leader is viewed as the artist or the leader of the artistic function and has a different image of the organization to the community than the administrator, who's viewed more as the guy who runs it, the nuts and bolts guy, or the guy who comes and asks you for money.
But I would say that the well-run organization, the artistic and administrative leaders appear to everybody outside, including even board members, appear to be almost as one, that there is total unity, I guess is a better word, between the two of them. In Chicago, there's a wonderful nonprofit theater company called Chicago Shakespeare. And for maybe its entire history, the artistic director has been Barbara Gaines, and Chris Henderson is the managing director, whatever his title is. They produce their own Shakespeare plays and others. They don't do only Shakespeare, but they also present visiting productions. Because I know them a little bit and I've talked with both of them, I know that the decisions on what to produce and what to present are made jointly. And they generally come to an agreement so that there's never a case of one of them having to win a battle. And I think that's the important thing for you, the students, that we're trying to teach something about this odd world of performing arts. And Ralph, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about it too. How is conflict handled when the chief artistic director and the chief of the administrative side can't agree? But A, how can they handle it? And B, what happens if they can't handle it?
Right. As I mentioned before, in a corporation, you don't have this tension or conflict inherent in the organizational structure. It's all brought together through a collaborative consensus, and the organizational hierarchy is a decision-making hierarchy. In a performing arts organization, it's more, there's a built-in tension between the art and the business. And therefore, conflict, or let's say differences of opinion, can arise between the art and the business. And the question that Henry is talking about is, how do you manage that? You, as the administrative head, are responsible for a certain set of financial objectives, budget expenses, budget revenue. The artistic leader is responsible for the quality of the artist. But as Henry said, it's a unity. And so there are inherent conflicts in those concepts. So in managing an organization, you must first understand your budget and your organization and how you sell tickets and who your audience is and how you build audiences. But you also have to have a tremendous respect and understanding for the artistic component. How is that artistic the component defining the organization? And how do you address and resolve the tensions that naturally exist when the artistic leader says, well, I want to mount this production that requires 50 people on stage, and you as the administrator says, that's way outside my budget size. And how do you resolve that? And it happens it should happen in a collaborative way, where both sides understand the other's function and they understand what they are attempting to achieve and how they're being measured in their jobs and how they are being successful in their jobs. And then having that dialogue to reconcile, if you will, that inherent conflict. Most of the time, this is done as a natural outgrowth of operations. It seldom becomes a conflict of irreconcilable differences. However, there are occasions when there will be higher levels of disagreement than others. And you just have to anticipate that. And when that occurs, I think a clear, thorough discussion of what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Why do you think it's good for the organization? Why do you think it's good for our artistic image and mission? And now let me tell you from the administrative side, my concerns. And then that dialogue will naturally reach with the right people taking the right attitudes and understanding their jobs, will reach a consensus.
Yeah, and I just want to say in conclusion, because we're coming really to the end of this, when the management leader and the artistic leader cannot agree, simply cannot do it, what happens is that it goes up to the board level, the board of directors, usually to the board chair. When that happens, you already have failure on your hands, in my opinion. It's the job of both the artistic and management director to assure that that doesn't happen. Because frankly, the board chairman, who is usually a business person not from the world of the art form that you are in, when he or she tries to resolve it, they don't have the knowledge to do it, and it's going to come down on the side of whoever they like, or often on the side of the artistic director, which is ultimately just breaks the relationship between the two. So a good part of managing an arts organization is to lose a couple of battles to the artistic director so that you build some credibility, and always listen and understand the point of view of the artist. And try really hard not to get to the point where you're going to the board leadership to resolve the conflict. Okay? Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you, Henry, and we'll see you all at the Zoom this week.
Yeah.